Welcome everyone to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition it's Kirby's Dreamland, brought to us by Nintendo. The original game in the Kirby franchise that introduced us to the lovable character known as Kirby, as well as many of the other characters and elements that we'll be seeing through the entire series. Interesting to note that the Kirby on the Kirby's Dreamland North American box art is depicted as white. Obviously a mistake by Nintendo of America, since it was a Game Boy game. I guess they weren't sure on what color Kirby was supposed to be. But of course on the Japanese box art he is depicted as pink, and he's always been pink. Also being the first game, it is missing some key elements from the Kirby franchise, mainly the ability to suck in enemies and actually copy their abilities. While Kirby can eat enemies and spit them back out in this game, he actually isn't able to take their powers. However, a couple of the powers do exist in the game in the form of items, including the microphone and bomb abilities. So here we go with Kirby's Dreamland for the Game Boy. Kirby's Dreamland was released relatively early on in the Nintendo Game Boy's life cycle, and it definitely sports some great graphics for its time. Throughout the very first level, you're being introduced to a lot of the enemies we'll be seeing for a long time, including Bronto Burt, Waddle Dee, and even Poppy Brother Jr. And speaking of the Poppy Brothers, it's time for the first mini-boss of the game, being Poppy Brother Sr. This enemy we'll be seeing in a lot of the Kirby games. He starts off by dancing on one side of the screen, jumps up, and throws a bomb at you. You can then suck in the bomb and spit it back out at Poppy Brother in order to do damage to him. It takes 3 hits to take him out, and as long as you stay a little bit away from him so that he doesn't end up jumping into you, you should have no problem beating him and continuing on the stage. One of the great things about Kirby, as you already know, is the ability to fly. You can suck in air that get Kirby fat, and then he can float up and fly over most of the levels, including a lot of the enemies. In Kirby's Dreamland, we're trying to get the food back in Dreamland, which King Dedede has stolen. Kirby loves food, and lots of his different abilities in this game are gotten by food, including Maximum Tomatoes, which give you full health back. Entering the door at the top of this area will get you to the first boss battle against Wispy Wood. This boss we've seen in almost every Kirby game, and he's definitely the easiest here. 3 apples will drop from the sky, be sure to suck them in and spit them back out at him, then get close to him so you can duck underneath the projectile that he'll then shoot out. After shooting out 2 projectiles, he'll then go back to dropping the apples. It takes 6 hits, and once you do so, you can celebrate and complete the stage. The next level is Tassel Lololo, which of course is named after Lolo, the character that was in his own series of games that was very popular on the NES. In the previous room you saw that I was able to grab the microphone ability and then use it in order to make a loud sound that destroyed all enemies on screen. This would later become its own ability that you could get from certain enemies in later Kirby games. Be careful while moving through the water that you work your way over to this area, watching out for the Gordo as it moves up and down. Thankfully, these Gordos will only take away 1 piece of health. However, there are some special Gordos later on in the game that can actually kill you instantly. Grabbing yourself the Invincibility Lollipop will get you invulnerability for a period of time. You're able to run through all enemies, and you can easily get past a room or 2 when you have it. Unfortunately though, we end up getting to a warp star not long after, and it takes us to a boss battle, so we don't get to use the invincibility for too long. Here we fight just Lololo for the first time. He walks over with his blocks that are typical from the Agerland series, and you can suck them in and spit them back out at him. Thankfully we only have to deal with him, but later on we'll have to face him and Lalala. Fly over these broom hatters in order to enter the door. In the next room, watch out for the Gordos and float all the way to the top and then to the top right door. This will take you instantly to the next area you want to go to. Here we have the boss battle against Lololo and Lalala. Just like the first battle, you have to suck in the blocks that they're pushing and spit them back out at them. You can do this a variety of ways. You can either attack them from the front, or you can jump up behind them and try to get it from behind. They each take 3 hits, and you can actually take out 1 before taking out the other. So you may want to focus on just 1 at first if you're having trouble dealing with both of them. But once they're done, Kirby's dance, and you move on to level number 3. Level number 3 is the Float Islands. The Float Islands introduce a couple new enemies, including a fan favorite known as Squishy. The little squid who, even though he would never give us an ability in any of the Kirby games, is definitely one of my favorites. Be careful not to fall too far down in the water because you can lose a life if you float too far down. You'll also have to be very careful of the cannons that'll float up and start firing their projectiles at you. Keep moving over to the right here to run underneath the coconuts, then take out the enemies to enter the door. Here we see the Kabul enemies for the first time. These weird type totem poles will float around and after a few seconds will actually disappear and reappear in another location, sometimes reappearing right on you and cause you to lose some health. In this room, jump on top of the ship and grab yourself the spicy curry. This will cause Kirby to flash for a period of time and you can still take damage, but you also spit out fireballs every time you try to attack. This will allow you to easily get past a lot of the enemies very fast. Grab yourself the warp star and it'll take you to the back of a whale, and pretty humorously this whale will then spit us out from the blowhole up into the clouds. Up here, stay on the bottom platform and walk to the right in order to grab yourself the mint leaf. This allows Kirby to be fat, as well as spit out a projectile that can hurt enemies, and you'll have to do this in order to fight the next boss. Kabul is one of my favorite bosses in this game. This giant blimp-like enemy keeps firing different cannonball shots at you and actually takes more than 6 hits. Every few hits he'll drop one piece of his health. Try to do your best to dodge in and out of his cannon shots while continuing firing at him. While this boss battle is pretty unique to the game and we don't see it too many times in the Kirby franchise, most of the games end up including at least one side-scrolling shooter type area of their game. Stage number 4 is Bubbly Clouds. Bubbly Clouds introduces us to a couple of enemies that we would see for a long time, including the Scarfies. These happy-go-lucky enemies look pretty harmless, but they explode when they're taken out, as well as if you try to suck them in, they turn evil and try to chase you around, eventually exploding after a few seconds. Inside this room we run into Sir Kibble for the first time. This knight-like enemy throws out his boomerang-type blade that we'll actually be able to use as an ability in later Kirby games. Use one of these Bronto Burts that's flying around in order to take out one of the Scarfies, and then you'll be able to do a jump or float over the rest of them. Be careful in this tight little area because some of these enemies move around pretty sporadic and it can be a little bit tough to dodge. When you make your way up into the right corner, this Gordo will actually be moving in a pattern, so be sure to watch out for it and stay low so you don't jump up into it. Here we have to battle Croco Jr. He starts off by throwing out a series of cannonballs. Standing in between the left pillar and the item in the center will allow you to dodge the cannonballs every time and they'll never be able to hurt you. After a few seconds, he'll end up dropping a Waddle Doo, which you can then pick up and throw it at him in order to hit him. Hitting him 3 times will take him out and we continue on in the level. In this area, be sure to grab the item on the left side so that you end up getting the ability to float and continuing firing projectiles. Then work your way to the large amount of star blocks and float your way up. If you're able to hug the left side here while falling down, you should be able to avoid both Waddle Doos without actually having to fight them. In the next area, you get yourself some spicy curry and have to run yourself all the way through a lot of star blocks. Just be careful that the falling stars don't hit you because they can cause some damage. In the final room, float up the middle to avoid any of the enemies, and you may have to go a little bit to the right to avoid one of the parasailing enemies. Once you enter the door at the top, it's time to battle Croco. This giant cloud enemy with spikes is electrified. He'll start off by doing his projectile, which will go around him. As long as you stay a decent length away from him, he won't be able to hit you while he rotates. Usually after doing this, he'll end up dropping a Waddle Doo, which you can then suck in and spit at him in order to actually hurt him. Just be careful when he swoops down in his arcing pattern that you're able to jump over him to avoid taking damage from contact. As long as you stay on the ground, you shouldn't have any problem jumping over him, sucking in the Waddle Dees, and finishing them off in order to move on to the final level of the game. Castle DDD has 4 rooms for you to take care of before you can actually fight the man himself. Each of these has a little area that are similar to the levels we've already been through. You must then hit a Kirby doll at the end of it in order to kill the Gordo that's surrounding the door so you can enter it and have a rematch against that particular boss. Just be very careful that you don't accidentally hit the Gordo, because hitting this Gordo will be instant death. Here we have the rematch against Lololo and La La La, which is exactly the same as before. Either suck in the blocks in front or back in order to actually hit them 3 times each to take them out and move on to the next door. Once you complete a door, it'll then be closed and you can move on to the next one. I usually like to take out the 2 bottom ones before then taking out the top 2. However, of course, you can do these in any order that you like. Fall straight down, being sure to hit the fat Kirby on the far right in order to get rid of the Gordo and enter the battle against Croco, who we just battled a few seconds ago. This battle is just the same as before. He has his rotating beam that goes around him, and every so often he'll drop a Waddle Doo so you can pick it up and spit it at him. Just be sure to jump over him when he swipes down, and you should have no problem beating him without taking too much damage. Next up, we'll go back to the original level of the game and have a rematch against Wispy Wood. Be careful here that when you jump down, you can't go past the tree trunk that's in the middle, so you'll have to float underneath it. Also, the Kirby is next to the door on the right this time, so be sure to jump over or float over the Gordo in order to hit him. Just like before, Wispy Wood is just as easy. 3 apples will fall down, take them all and throw them at him. Then, stay to the right in order to avoid his projectile, which will easily go over your head, and then take in the next 3 apples and finish him off. In the final door, be careful of the squishy, as well as there's beam enemies that are going to be underneath the platform. When you fall down here, just be very careful that one of these enemies doesn't jump into you, and then float in between the spikes on the ceiling and ground, jump over the Gordo and enter the door in order to get to the area where the boss is. Walk across the platform like we did the first time, grab your mint leaf, and now we have a rematch against Kabul. Like I said before, this is my favorite battle in the game because it's reminiscent of a scrolling shooter, and it works rather well. You can float easily in and out of all the cannon shots. Just be careful when she decides to fly over to the left side of the screen that you dodge her and then continue firing at her as she goes back over to the right. Now it's time for the battle against DDD himself. This battle, if you've ever played Kirby's Adventure but never played this game, is pretty much the same thing you could do there, except he can't inflate himself. Most of the time, just jump over him he's running at you without actually having his hammer out. If he has the hammer, try to get him to get close to you, in which case he'll swing the hammer down, causing a star to appear, allowing you to suck that in and spit it at him. Unlike the other bosses, it actually takes 10 hits in order to beat DDD. Sometimes though, he'll end up using his hammer too close to the wall, and you may want to just take the damage from the hammer while also being able to suck in the item to try to get the battle over with a little bit quicker. Watch out for any time that he jumps in the air, because when he lands, this will also give you an opportunity to grab a star. After hitting him the last time, you can sit back and enjoy the ending. While Kirby's Dreamland was the first in the series and may be looked at as a little bit shallow nowadays, it's still a great platformer for the Game Boy. While Kirby's Adventure would really bring Kirby to the forefront, being one of the best games released in the later years of the Nintendo Entertainment System. That game would introduce us the copy ability, which has become a staple in the Kirby franchise. Kirby's Dreamland, of course, has not been forgotten either. As the last stage in Kirby's Adventure, you kind of play a mix-up of all the different levels of this game in one stage, as well as in Kirby Superstar, which is arguably the most popular game in the franchise. The first game located in Kirby Superstar is called Spring Breeze, which is actually made up of all the stages from Kirby's Dreamland. As Kirby holds up a sign saying bye-bye, he delivers all the food back to the citizens of Dreamland. You can also see that you actually can play a harder version of the game if you like, by holding up A and select at the title screen. While the enemies and some of the gameplay does change up a little bit, you also have less health to deal with while playing through that version of the game. One other note though is the ending does pretty much remain the same in that version. But either way, that's going to wrap up this edition of Play It Through. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.